Lila walked quickly along the narrow street, her shoes worn and slightly scuffed, feeling the chill of the evening in her thin sweater. The city was alive around her, with a hum of traffic, laughter spilling out of nearby cafes, and the occasional siren echoing in the distance. But none of it really mattered to her right now. She had a small envelope clutched in her hand, the only thing keeping her from completely panicking. It contained exactly $5, her entire budget for the evening. She had never been on a blind date before, and the thought of it made her stomach twist into knots. Her friend had insisted, promising that it was just a casual dinner and that she had nothing to worry about. But Lila knew the truth. She could barely pay for her own meals, and $5 was nothing. She had skipped lunch, hoping she could stretch the amount enough to get a small dish, and now she was here, standing in front of a modest restaurant, unsure of how she would survive the night without feeling embarrassed. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The warmth of the restaurant hit her immediately, a comforting contrast to the cold outside. The smell of fresh bread and roasting meat made her stomach rumble, and she pressed a hand over it, wishing she had enough money to order more than just water. She felt every eye on her as she walked to the small table her blind date had reserved. She wasn't sure if it was real attention or just the natural curiosity people had toward strangers, but it made her cheeks burn. Her date was already there, sitting with an air of confidence that she could never fake. He was tall, well-dressed, and spoke with an easy charm, but his words made her uneasy. He seemed more interested in talking about himself than asking anything about her. Lila forced a smile, nodding politely, but inside she felt the tension build. She could barely afford the tip, let alone the meal he seemed to expect her to enjoy. As she glanced down at her envelope, she noticed a coin slip out. It clinked softly against the floor. Her heart sank. She bent down quickly, trying to pick it up without drawing attention. A gentle voice startled her. "Here," the voice said, and Lila looked up to see a man at the next table holding the coin out to her with a small, understanding smile. He was alone, sitting quietly, reading something on his phone, but his eyes were warm and observant. There was no judgment in his expression, only a simple kindness that made her chest tighten. "Thank you," she whispered, embarrassed that she had drawn attention to herself. "No problem," he said softly. "It happens to everyone." He returned to his phone, but Lila couldn't help sneaking glances at him. There was something about the way he carried himself that was calm and steady, a quiet strength that seemed completely out of place in a world where she was used to struggling just to get by. Her date, unaware of the moment, continued talking about his job, his car, and his vacation plans, all things that made Lila feel like an outsider in her own life. She smiled politely, nodding at the right moments, but her mind kept drifting back to the man at the next table. There was a simplicity about him, a kind of attention to small details that made her feel seen, even in a place where she felt invisible. She tried to focus on her food, ordering the cheapest dish on the menu and a glass of water. She counted every penny, trying to make the envelope stretch just enough. As she waited, she noticed the man again. He looked up from his phone, and their eyes met briefly. A small, polite smile passed between them, and for a moment the weight of her worries lifted. It was a small thing, a simple acknowledgement, but it made her feel less alone in a crowded room. The conversation with her blind date dragged on. He talked endlessly, oblivious to the discomfort he caused, and Lila began to feel trapped. She glanced at her watch, hoping the evening would end soon. Her stomach twisted with anxiety, and she felt a sudden urge to escape. The man at the next table seemed to sense it. He watched quietly as she fidgeted, noting the way she pressed her hands together and avoided eye contact. His expression was calm, not invasive, but filled with quiet concern. Lila felt a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. Who was this man? Why did he seem to notice things no one else did? She made a decision. She couldn't stay another minute with someone who didn't care about her. She politely excused herself, murmuring an apology. Her date barely noticed, too caught up in his own stories, and she slipped past him, feeling a sense of liberation mixed with anxiety. As she walked toward the exit, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned and saw the man from the next table standing there, holding a small dessert plate. Lila froze, unsure how to react. "For you," he said simply. "I thought you might like this." His smile was gentle, not patronizing, and there was no expectation, only a simple gesture of kindness. Lila's eyes widened. She had expected embarrassment, judgment, or even indifference. But here was someone offering her a small comfort without asking anything in return. She felt a lump in her throat and managed a shaky, "Thank you." "It's nothing," he said, turning to leave but pausing. "Enjoy it." She watched him go, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected. The dessert wasn't expensive, but the gesture carried weight far beyond its cost. She sat down at a quiet corner, tasting the sweetness slowly, savoring the kindness more than the sugar. For the first time that evening, she allowed herself to relax. The anxiety that had knotted her stomach all day began to loosen, replaced by a tentative curiosity about the stranger who had noticed her. There was something genuine in the way he had acted, something rare in a world that often ignored people like her. As she finished the small dessert, she thought about the man again. Who was he? Why had he taken the time to show her a small act of kindness? She couldn't stop thinking about the calm in his eyes, the way he seemed to understand without needing words. It was a strange feeling, one that left her both unsettled and hopeful. The evening outside continued, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. Lila stepped out of the restaurant feeling the cold again, but with a newfound sense of lightness. The weight of the night felt a little easier to bear. She walked slowly, thinking about the unexpected kindness she had received, and wondering if their paths would cross again. Meanwhile, the man returned to his table, watching the door with a quiet curiosity of his own. There was something about the girl, something that drew him in without explanation. He didn't know why, but he felt an unusual pull, a need to see her smile again to understand her world. It was a small, quiet feeling, but it was strong enough to stay with him as he finished his meal. Lila didn't notice him again that night, but the memory of his gesture lingered. She walked home, clutching her small envelope tightly, feeling a mix of gratitude and wonder. The night had started with worry and fear, but it had ended with a simple kindness that left her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. She didn't know what the future held, but for now, she carried with her a small spark of hope, a reminder that even in the most difficult moments, someone might notice, someone might care, even if just for a fleeting instant. That spark stayed with her as she climbed the steps to her tiny apartment, unlocking the door and stepping inside. The room was small and sparsely furnished, but it was hers, and for the first time that evening she allowed herself to feel a little peace. She placed the envelope on the table, next to the small dessert container, and smiled faintly. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, but inside, Lila felt a quiet calm. The evening had been a reminder that life could be unpredictable, full of surprises that might come when she least expected them. And somewhere in a world filled with strangers, there was a man who had noticed her, who had offered a small act of kindness that mattered far more than its size. As she settled in for the night, she allowed herself to imagine what might happen next. Perhaps the world wasn't as cold as she had always thought. Perhaps sometimes moments of warmth and understanding could appear in the most unexpected places, carried by people she had never met before. And perhaps, just perhaps, this was the beginning of something new. The next morning, Lila woke to the sound of the city outside her small window. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, painting golden lines across her modest room. She stretched and tried to shake off the lingering nerves from the night before. The memory of the blind date made her cheeks warm and her stomach twist. She had expected embarrassment, maybe disappointment, but instead, she remembered a quiet kindness that lingered in her mind. She got ready for her first job of the day, pulling on a worn sweater and jeans and tying her hair back quickly. Money was tight, as always, and she had to work both jobs today to make rent. Still, the thought of the stranger's small gesture kept her walking with a little more lightness than usual. Somehow, it felt like the world wasn't completely indifferent to her struggles. At the diner where she worked in the mornings, she moved quickly, serving coffee and toast to regular customers who greeted her warmly. Her boss, a middle-aged man with a gruff voice but a kind heart, always reminded her to stay positive, even when things seemed difficult. Lila smiled and nodded, knowing he meant well, but her mind drifted to last night and the man at the restaurant. She wondered who he was and why he had been so thoughtful. Hours later, after her morning shift ended, Lila hurried to her second job, a small bookstore tucked into a quiet corner of the city. She loved working there despite the low pay. Being surrounded by books and the faint smell of paper made her feel calm. She greeted her coworkers with a tired but genuine smile, and they responded in kind, chatting about small things that brightened the long hours. Meanwhile, Across town, Ethan sat in his office overlooking the city. His day had begun early, filled with meetings, calls, and endless responsibilities as the CEO of a growing company. Yet his mind kept drifting back to the young woman from the restaurant. He couldn't explain why he was so curious about her. There had been something in her eyes, a spark of resilience and warmth that had touched him unexpectedly. He found himself thinking about her small struggles, her polite smile, and the way she had handled herself despite the obvious tension of the evening. He had met plenty of people in his life, many of them wealthy, educated, or influential, but none had left such a lasting impression on him. It was strange and unexpected, but he couldn't shake it. Back at the bookstore, Lila took a short break, sitting by the window with a cup of water. Her mind wandered to the events of last night. She replayed the brief exchange, the kind gesture, and the small dessert that had lifted her spirits. She hadn't expected anything, not even a smile from a stranger, and yet it had made her feel valued. The world had always seemed heavy and indifferent, but that small act reminded her that kindness existed, even in the smallest forms. Her thoughts were interrupted by a customer asking for help finding a book. Lila smiled and guided the person to the shelf, answering questions and chatting briefly. The work distracted her, but her mind returned repeatedly to last night. She found herself wondering if she would ever see the man again. It was a silly thought, she told herself, but she couldn't ignore the warmth it gave her. After her shift ended, Lila walked home slowly, carrying a small paper bag with a few groceries she had managed to buy. The streets were busy, people rushing past her, absorbed in their own worlds. She felt invisible again, as if she had stepped back into her usual place in the city. Yet the memory of last night remained, like a gentle glow that refused to fade. She prepared a small dinner with what she had bought, savoring each bite. It wasn't much, just a simple pasta dish with vegetables, but it was enough to fill her stomach and remind her that she was capable of making something work with very little. She ate slowly, reflecting on her life, her struggles, and the tiny moments of joy that occasionally appeared, like the stranger's gesture the night before. The next few days passed in a blur of work and small errands. Lila moved through her routine mechanically, but she carried a quiet hope with her. She found herself glancing at the restaurant when she walked past it, imagining the man sitting there again, reading or observing the world in his calm, quiet way. She didn't know why she thought about him so much, but it was comforting, like a small thread connecting her to something unexpected. One evening, after finishing her second job, she stopped by the restaurant on a whim, hoping to see him again. The place was familiar, the smell of food and the soft murmur of conversation welcoming her. She scanned the room, her heart beating a little faster than usual. There he was, sitting at the same table as before, alone, reading something on his phone. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her the same gentle smile. Lila felt her cheeks flush, unsure how to approach him. She considered turning away, thinking she might be imposing, but something inside her urged her to stay. She walked over, her steps tentative but determined. He looked up, and this time he gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then accepted, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. They began talking, starting with small, polite conversation. Lila mentioned her work in the bookstore, her challenges, and the long hours she put in to make ends meet. Ethan listened intently, not interrupting, his eyes reflecting genuine interest. He asked questions, not out of obligation, but because he truly wanted to understand her life. Lila was surprised by how natural the conversation felt, how easy it was to speak without fear of judgment. As they talked, the conversation shifted to their dreams and hopes. Lila shared her love for books and the little moments of beauty she found in everyday life. She spoke about the people she admired, the places she wanted to see, and the life she hoped to build despite the obstacles. Ethan, in turn, spoke about his work, the pressures of being a single parent and the isolation that often came with success. He didn't boast or complain. He simply shared, allowing Lila to see a side of him few ever did. Time seemed to slow around them. The noise of the restaurant faded, leaving only the quiet rhythm of conversation, laughter, and shared understanding. Lila felt a strange sense of comfort, as if she had known him longer than just a few nights ago. Ethan, too, felt the unusual pull of connection, something deeper than curiosity, something that made him want to know more about her world and her heart. As the evening progressed, they laughed over small mishaps like Lila nearly spilling her water, and Ethan almost knocking over his glass. The shared moments of lightness broke the tension and allowed them to see each other as real, imperfect people. Lila found herself opening up, sharing stories she hadn't told anyone before. Ethan listened with patience, offering insight, encouragement, and a gentle humor that made her feel at ease. When it was time to leave, Ethan offered to walk her home. Lila hesitated, remembering the tightness of her budget and the distance she had to travel, but she agreed. The walk was quiet at first, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement. They spoke intermittently, the conversation flowing naturally without pressure or expectation. At her apartment, they paused, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Lila thanked him sincerely for the kindness, the dessert, and the conversation that had lifted her spirits. Ethan smiled, acknowledging her gratitude without making it feel like a debt. There was a mutual respect, an understanding that this moment was shared freely, without conditions. As she watched him walk away, Lila felt a warmth in her chest, a gentle hope that perhaps, in a world that often seemed indifferent, there were still people who noticed, who cared, and who offered kindness without expectation. She closed the door behind her, carrying the memory of the evening like a small treasure, one that reminded her that even in the toughest times, moments of connection and understanding could appear unexpectedly, changing the course of her day, her week, or perhaps something much larger. Lila sat by her window that night, looking out at the city lights. The streets were busy, filled with people rushing past each other, absorbed in their own lives. But she felt a quiet sense of calm. For the first time in a long while, she believed that life could hold small surprises, that genuine connections could form in the most unlikely places, and somewhere out there a man had noticed her, cared for her momentarily, and left her with a sense of hope that refused to fade, no matter how small it seemed. The days that followed were filled with a strange mix of routine and anticipation for Lila. Her jobs were as demanding as ever, but she carried a quiet hope in her heart that made her mornings easier to face. She found herself replaying the previous night's conversations, the way Ethan had listened so patiently, and the small, simple gestures that had made her feel seen. Life had been hard for her, weighed down by responsibilities and a constant struggle to make ends meet. But these moments gave her a strange lightness she hadn't felt in months. She continued her daily routine, waking early, preparing for her shifts, and moving through the city with practiced care. Yet her mind frequently wandered to the restaurant, to the moment when their eyes had met, and to the gentle way he had offered her comfort without making her feel awkward. She wondered if he had thought about her too, or if it had been just a fleeting connection for him. Still, she allowed herself to hope carefully, so as not to be crushed if reality disappointed her. Ethan, on the other side of town, found himself similarly affected. His workdays were filled with important meetings, phone calls, and strategy sessions, yet his thoughts drifted repeatedly to Lila. There was something about her authenticity, her resilience, and the way she carried herself despite hardship that drew him in. He had met many people in his life, some successful, some charming, some clever, but she was different. She had not asked for anything. She had simply been herself, and that had been enough to leave an impression. One evening, after finishing her second job, Lila hesitated outside the restaurant once again. Her heart beat quickly, unsure whether to go in. She had convinced herself to act on impulse, to see if perhaps he was there, to continue the connection that had begun so unexpectedly. Taking a deep breath, she entered the familiar warmth, scanning the room carefully. Her eyes landed on him almost immediately. He was there, sitting quietly, his posture relaxed, his attention divided between a small notebook and the world around him. She hesitated for a moment, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves, then walked toward him. He looked up and their eyes met once more. The smile he offered was genuine and unhurried, and it filled her with a strange sense of relief. Without hesitation, he gestured toward the chair across from him. "Hi," she said softly, sliding into the seat. Her voice was tentative but steady, a reflection of the trust she had begun to feel. "Hi," he replied, his voice calm and warm. "I'm glad you came." They began talking, and this time the conversation flowed more naturally. The first exchanges were simple, questions about work, favorite foods, and the little quirks of daily life. But soon, it deepened. Lila found herself opening up in ways she had rarely allowed herself. She spoke about her dreams, the small things she hoped for, and the obstacles she faced. Ethan listened intently, offering insight when appropriate, but mostly just providing a steady presence that allowed her to feel comfortable. Their conversation turned to books, music, and small joys that brightened their respective lives. Lila shared the little pleasures she found in simple things: a morning coffee, a quiet corner in the bookstore, the laughter of a child passing by, and Ethan responded with stories of moments he cherished, such as his daughter's small achievements or a quiet evening at home without obligations. It was a meeting of worlds, one modest and struggling, the other privileged yet lonely, and yet both found common ground in their human experiences. During the evening, Lila's attention drifted briefly to her wallet. She had barely enough money to cover a small meal, and the thought of needing to pay for anything else made her stomach twist. Ethan noticed her unease and, without making her feel judged, leaned slightly forward. "Don't worry about it tonight," he said gently. "Just enjoy yourself." The simplicity of the gesture, the lack of expectation or judgment, made her heart swell. She nodded, grateful, and allowed herself to relax completely for the first time in weeks. It was a strange, liberating feeling, to sit with someone who saw her without needing her to prove herself or explain everything about her life. As the night went on, they laughed over small stories, shared moments of surprise, and discovered common interests. Lila found herself admiring his humility, the way he spoke of his responsibilities and his daughter without boasting. Ethan, in turn, admired her resilience and warmth, the way she navigated the world with quiet dignity despite her struggles. Each of them was learning about the other slowly, carefully, savoring the moment without rushing. After finishing a modest meal, Lila prepared to leave, feeling a mixture of gratitude and hesitation. She had been hesitant to let herself trust someone, to allow herself to feel safe and understood, but this evening had been different. The fear of judgment had not materialized. Instead, she had been met with kindness, patience, and genuine interest. Ethan stood as she gathered her belongings. "I can walk you home if you'd like," he offered. There was no pressure in his tone, only a gentle suggestion. She hesitated, remembering her small budget and the distance she would need to cover. Still, the idea of walking with him felt comforting. She nodded, allowing herself to accept the offer. The walk was quiet at first, both of them taking in the city around them. The streets were busy, filled with people rushing past. Yet in their small bubble there was a calmness that contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. They spoke intermittently, sharing thoughts on life, work, and the small joys they had discovered recently. There was a comfort in the silence as well, a mutual understanding that not every moment needed to be filled with words. When they reached her apartment, Lila paused. The streetlight cast a soft glow over the entrance, illuminating the small steps that led up to her door. She turned to Ethan, her eyes reflecting a quiet gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying more weight than the words themselves. "For everything tonight and last night, I appreciate it more than I can say." He smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips. "It was my pleasure. I'm glad we met." There was a sincerity in his tone that reassured her. He didn't expect anything, and that made the connection feel all the more real. As she entered her apartment, closing the door behind her, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and contentment. The day had been long, her work tiring, and yet her heart felt lighter. She placed the small items she had purchased earlier on the counter and sat by the window for a moment, reflecting on the unusual turn her life had taken in the past week. A chance encounter, a small gesture of kindness, and the presence of someone who had noticed her had shifted her perspective in ways she hadn't anticipated. The next morning, Lila woke with a renewed sense of purpose. She moved through her daily routine with a quiet determination, fueled by the memory of the conversations and shared moments from the previous evenings. Work was demanding, yet she felt stronger, more capable, more deserving of small joys and kindness. She found herself smiling more easily, interacting with customers and co-workers with a new lightness. Ethan, meanwhile, continued his routine, but his thoughts were often with Lila. There was something refreshing about their connection, something that reminded him of the simple pleasures of life that he had long neglected. He didn't rush to define it or label it. He simply allowed the feeling to exist, enjoying the small, genuine connection that had begun to form. Over the next several days, their interactions continued to grow naturally. They met at the restaurant a few more times, sometimes sharing a quiet meal, other times just a cup of coffee and conversation. With each meeting, Lila felt more at ease, more confident, and more willing to open her heart to the possibility of trust. Ethan admired the way she carried herself, the resilience and grace she exhibited in the face of challenges that would have overwhelmed many others. It became clear to both of them that their bond was not based on circumstance or convenience, but on a genuine understanding and appreciation of one another. Lila's life was far from easy, and Ethan's was far from simple, yet they found comfort and companionship in the shared moments, the laughter, and the quiet understanding that developed between them. One evening, after finishing a particularly busy day, Lila paused outside the restaurant again. She felt a small thrill as she entered and saw Ethan already there. He looked up, his smile lighting up his face, and gestured for her to sit. There was no need for words. The comfort and familiarity between them spoke volumes. As they talked that night, Lila realized something important. Life was unpredictable and often harsh, but moments of genuine kindness, understanding, and connection could appear when least expected. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while she felt hopeful. The world was still challenging, still uncertain, but it was not entirely devoid of light. Ethan, too, felt a sense of calm and contentment that he hadn't experienced in years. In Lila, he saw not only someone who needed nothing from him, but someone who offered something priceless: authenticity, resilience, and the quiet beauty of a human heart unburdened by pretense. Their connection was small, unassuming yet profoundly meaningful, a reminder that life's most important moments often came in the simplest, most unexpected forms. As the evening drew to a close, they left the restaurant together, walking side by side through the bustling city streets. Their conversation flowed naturally, interspersed with moments of comfortable silence. When they reached Lila's apartment, she turned to him, a soft smile on her lips. "Thank you," she said again, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. He returned the smile, nodding gently. "Thank you for letting me share this time with you." As she watched him walk away, she felt a sense of warmth that stayed with her long after the door had closed. The world was still challenging, still full of obstacles, but it also contained moments of light, connection, and kindness that made the struggles worthwhile. And in that knowledge, Lila found a quiet strength, a hope that carried her into the days grew longer as the season shifted, and Lila found herself moving through life with a quiet sense of anticipation. Her mornings began earlier, not just out of necessity for work, but because she had begun to look forward to the possibility of meeting Ethan again. Their interactions were still new, but the comfort and understanding that grew between them made her feel more confident in herself and her place in the world. She worked both jobs with a renewed energy, her mind often drifting to moments shared with Ethan. There was a lightness in her step, a softness to her smile that had not been there before. Customers noticed it, co-workers commented on it, and even her boss seemed to approve of the subtle change in her demeanor. Lila didn't know if she could fully explain why she felt so different, but she recognized it as hope, something she had learned to keep hidden in the past but now allowed to breathe within her. Ethan's life, too, had begun to shift in subtle ways. His office remained a place of constant pressure, filled with the weight of responsibilities and endless demands. Yet he found that he looked forward to his evenings with a new sense of excitement. The thought of Lila waiting at the restaurant, of her presence offering a quiet escape from the monotony and stress, brought a warmth to his chest that he hadn't realized he was missing. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, the possibility of genuine connection without pretense. One particular evening, Lila decided to treat herself to a small, modest meal before heading home from work. Her budget was tight, but she allowed herself this small indulgence, thinking of it as a reward for surviving a long week. She entered the familiar restaurant, the scent of warm bread and roasting dishes comforting her instantly. The bell above the door rang softly, and her eyes found Ethan almost immediately. He was seated in the same corner, reading through papers as usual. But the moment he noticed her, he stood slightly, offering a welcoming smile. Lila approached, and he gestured to the seat across from him. She slid into it, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease. There was a quiet rhythm in their interaction, a familiarity that had grown naturally over the past few meetings. The conversation started lightly, discussing books, movies, and small happenings of their week. But it gradually deepened. They shared thoughts about life, dreams, and the subtle complexities that shaped their worlds. As they spoke, Lila found herself opening up about the challenges she faced, balancing work, managing finances, and keeping hope alive despite the constant struggle. She didn't ask for help. She simply shared her story, trusting that he would understand without judgment. Ethan listened with genuine interest, his expression thoughtful and compassionate. He offered advice sparingly, more often simply validating her experiences, making her feel that her struggles were seen and acknowledged. The evening passed in a mixture of conversation, laughter, and moments of comfortable silence. Lila realized how rare it was to find someone who could listen without distraction or judgment, someone who could share in the complexities of life without making her feel inadequate. Ethan, too, was struck by the depth of her character, the resilience that shone through her words and actions. Despite her financial struggles, she carried herself with dignity and a quiet strength that inspired him. After their meal, Ethan suggested a walk. Lila hesitated briefly, thinking of her budget, the late hour, and the distance, but ultimately agreed. The city streets were illuminated by streetlights and the soft glow of shop windows. The air was crisp, and the sounds of distant traffic and conversation formed a gentle backdrop. Their steps fell into a comfortable rhythm, and the conversation continued naturally. They spoke of small joys, the changing leaves, a child laughing in the distance, a song drifting from an open window. Lila shared her love for small, unnoticed moments, the quiet beauty of ordinary life. Ethan listened attentively, and in turn, he revealed parts of his life that few had seen. The loneliness of his responsibilities, the joy and challenge of raising his daughter alone, and the moments that brought him genuine happiness amidst the pressures of work. As they walked, Lila felt a sense of ease that was rare in her life. She could speak without fear of judgment, laugh without reservation, and simply exist in the moment. Ethan, too, found the walk invigorating, a reminder that life's richness often lay not in achievements or status, but in small, meaningful connections. At a quiet corner near her apartment, they paused. Lila turned to him, her expression soft. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying sincere warmth. "For everything. You've made things feel lighter somehow." Ethan smiled, a small, reassuring curve of his lips. "You deserve it," he replied simply. "It's easy to see the light in someone who works so hard and still carries hope." They parted with a quiet understanding, a promise of continued connection, without words needing to seal it. Lila entered her apartment, closing the door behind her, and sat by her window. The night was calm, and the city below was alive with distant lights and murmurs of life. She reflected on the evening, on the growing sense of trust and warmth she felt toward Ethan, and on the unexpected kindness that had first drawn them together. In the following days, Lila noticed subtle changes within herself. She approached her work with more confidence, handled difficult customers with patience, and even smiled more readily at strangers on the street. There was a sense of resilience and hope that had been dormant, now awakened by the simple, consistent kindness she had experienced. She realized that even in a world full of challenges, moments of genuine connection could be transformative. Ethan's days continued to be demanding, yet he found himself carving out time to think of her, to plan small gestures, or simply to wonder about her day. He admired her ability to navigate life with dignity and determination, and he felt an increasing desire to support her in ways that respected her independence. The balance was delicate, but he managed it with care, mindful not to overstep while still offering encouragement and companionship. One evening, Lila decided to stop by the bookstore she worked at to pick up a few supplies. As she walked through the familiar aisles, she noticed a small notebook on the counter. Flipping it open, she began to write down thoughts and observations, inspired by the conversations she had shared with Ethan. She reflected on the small lessons she had learned, the importance of kindness, the value of listening, and the unexpected beauty in human connections. Ethan, meanwhile, sat in his office late into the night, reviewing plans for the company but unable to ignore the thoughts that lingered on Lila. He considered the small gestures that had brought them together and the conversations that had allowed them to see one another's worlds. There was a quiet respect and admiration forming between them, an understanding that transcended social status or financial differences. Over time, their meetings became more frequent, yet always unhurried. They met for meals, for coffee, or sometimes simply to walk and talk, each encounter reinforcing the bond they had begun to form. Lila found strength in the connection, while Ethan discovered a renewed sense of purpose and joy. Both realized that the simplest interactions often carried the deepest impact, and that genuine understanding could transform even the most ordinary moments. As the month progressed, Lila noticed subtle changes in her life outside of her connection with Ethan. She approached challenges with a calmer mind, handled setbacks with patience, and allowed herself to dream a little more freely. The quiet support she received did not solve her financial struggles, nor did it erase her hardships, but it provided a sense of grounding and hope that empowered her to face the future with courage. Ethan, too, found that the connection with Lila influenced his perspective. He approached work and life with a renewed sense of empathy, mindful of the struggles that others faced and appreciative of the simple human moments that often went unnoticed. In Lila, he had discovered a reminder of life's genuine beauty, and it shaped the way he moved through his world. One cool evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with soft hues of pink and orange, Lila and Ethan met once more. They walked along the quiet streets, sharing observations, laughter, and reflections. There was no rush, no expectation, just the natural flow of two people enjoying each other's company. They paused at a small park, the air filled with the faint rustle of leaves and distant sounds of life. Lila looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the fading sun. "It's strange," she said quietly, "how one small gesture can change so much. I never expected to feel this way." Ethan smiled gently, understanding exactly what she meant. "Sometimes the smallest moments have the greatest impact," he replied. "It's the simple things that remind us of what truly matters." They sat on a bench watching the city breathe around them, sharing a quiet comfort that spoke louder than words. Lila felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years, and Ethan experienced a rare contentment, a moment of clarity that life's complexities were often best met with patience, kindness, and understanding. As night fell and the city lights began to shimmer, they rose to leave, walking side by side with the unspoken promise of continued connection. Both carried the warmth of the evening in their hearts, a reminder that life, despite its challenges, offered moments of unexpected beauty, trust, and companionship. And in that realization, they found a shared strength, a quiet hope, and a growing bond that neither had anticipated, but both cherished deeply. The weeks passed with a gentle rhythm that felt both comforting and new to Lila. Her life remained busy, filled with work and responsibilities, yet the encounters she shared with Ethan had become a steady source of strength and hope. Each meeting brought new understanding, laughter, and the subtle warmth of human connection that she had long missed. One evening, after a particularly long shift at the bookstore, Lila felt exhausted but determined. She had just enough energy to stop by the restaurant, hoping to see Ethan once more. As she entered, the familiar warmth of the place embraced her. The smell of fresh bread and simmering dishes brought a sense of home she hadn't realized she had been missing. Her eyes scanned the room, and there he was, sitting in the same corner, his posture relaxed and a soft smile on his face. Lila walked over, and he stood to greet her, a small gesture that felt intimate despite the casual setting. They shared a quiet smile before she took her seat, the tension of her long day easing almost immediately. Conversation flowed as it had before, a comfortable mix of small talk, shared stories, and deeper reflections on life's challenges and joys. Over the weeks, Lila began to notice subtle ways in which Ethan supported her, without making her feel dependent. He offered advice when asked, shared encouragement, and sometimes simply listened, giving her the space to express herself fully. She found that she could talk about her fears, her dreams, and her everyday struggles without hesitation. The kindness he offered was consistent, quiet, and respectful, never overbearing. One rainy evening after leaving her second job, Lila found herself struggling with the heavy weight of exhaustion and worry. The streets were slick and the umbrellas around her bobbed in a sea of hurried people. She wondered if she could make it home without feeling completely drained. As she approached the familiar restaurant, she noticed Ethan waiting outside, umbrella in hand. "You're soaked," he said gently, offering her a place under his umbrella. Lila hesitated, then accepted, Grateful for the small but significant gesture, they walked together in silence, the rain creating a quiet rhythm around them. It was a simple moment, yet one that reminded her of the importance of shared presence, the way small acts of consideration could lift burdens far heavier than the rain. During their walk, they spoke about the little things that had been meaningful in their lives, the unexpected kindnesses that had shaped them, and the ways they had learned to navigate challenges. Lila shared her small victories, saving a little money, completing a difficult task at work, and Ethan celebrated them with genuine enthusiasm. He shared his own moments of pride, both as a parent and as a professional, with the same authenticity that had drawn Lila to him in the first place. As the weeks turned into months, their bond grew stronger. Lila's confidence and sense of self-worth increased, not because Ethan gave her anything she didn't already possess, but because he recognized and validated her strength. Ethan, in turn, found that his own life felt fuller and more meaningful because of the shared experiences and mutual understanding they had cultivated. They had discovered a rare kind of friendship, one that was rooted in trust, empathy, and the recognition of each other's humanity. One afternoon, Lila received a small surprise at the bookstore, a book she had mentioned months ago, one she couldn't afford at the time. She found a note tucked inside the cover. "For your curiosity and your courage." It was from Ethan. She held it close, feeling a wave of gratitude. It was not a lavish gift, nor did it change her circumstances, but it was a tangible reminder of the care and thoughtfulness that had defined their connection. In the evenings, they continued their walks and meetings, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying the comfort of shared silence. They discussed everything from literature and art to their dreams for the future. Lila shared her desire to continue learning, to improve her life, and perhaps one day help others who faced similar struggles. Ethan spoke of his hopes for his daughter, his desire to be present and supportive, and his wish to maintain balance in a life that often demanded more than he could give. Their relationship was never rushed or pressured. Each meeting was an opportunity to connect, to share, and to grow together. Lila felt the weight of her worries lessen with every interaction, and Ethan found joy in the authenticity and warmth she brought into his life. The mutual respect and understanding that had developed between them created a safe space where both could be themselves fully, without fear of judgment. One evening, as autumn leaves rustled around them, they walked to a quiet park near Lila's apartment. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink, and the air was crisp with the approaching night. They found a bench and sat together, watching the world move around them. Lila felt a sense of peace that she had rarely known, a feeling that life, though challenging, contained moments of unexpected beauty and connection. "I never imagined meeting someone like you," Lila said quietly, her voice reflective. "It's surprising how a simple encounter can change everything." Ethan nodded, understanding completely. "It's the small things, really," he replied. "A smile, a kind word, a shared moment. That's what makes life meaningful." They sat in silence for a while, letting the words sink in. Lila felt a sense of gratitude for the journey that had led her here. From a nervous girl with $5 to someone who had discovered a rare friendship, understanding, and trust. Ethan felt the same, appreciating the unexpected joy and perspective that Lila had brought into his life. As night fell, they rose and walked back through the quiet streets, their conversation light and easy. They reached Lila's apartment, pausing at the door. There was no need for declarations or promises, only a shared understanding of the bond they had built. They parted with a warm smile, a gentle touch of farewell, and the knowledge that their connection was something to be cherished and nurtured. Lila entered her apartment, closing the door behind her, and felt a sense of contentment she had rarely experienced. She placed the small book on her shelf, a reminder of the thoughtfulness and care that had defined their growing friendship. She reflected on how far she had come, how moments of kindness, understanding, and trust had transformed her perspective on life. Ethan returned to his apartment, his thoughts lingering on Lila. He felt a quiet joy, a renewed sense of purpose, and a deeper understanding of what truly mattered in life. Their connection had brought balance, warmth, and meaning to his world, reminding him that genuine human connection was one of the most valuable things one could experience. In the days that followed, their bond continued to strengthen, marked by shared experiences, laughter, and small acts of kindness. Lila gained confidence and hope, recognizing that she had the strength to face life's challenges. Ethan found peace and fulfillment, knowing that he had discovered someone who valued honesty, resilience, and authenticity. Their story did not end with grand gestures or dramatic events. Instead, it grew quietly, steadily, and meaningfully. The friendship and understanding they nurtured became a foundation for hope, courage, and mutual respect. Lila learned that even in difficult circumstances, human kindness and connection could create a profound impact. Ethan learned that success and responsibility were richer when shared with someone who truly understood and appreciated life's complexities. In the end, their bond was a testament to the power of small, genuine acts, the importance of empathy, and the beauty of connecting with another person in a meaningful way. Lila, once a girl with only $5 and a sense of uncertainty, had discovered a friendship that enriched her life, while Ethan, a man with responsibility and wealth, had found a companionship that nurtured his heart. Together, they had created a story of hope, understanding, and the enduring strength of human connection. The early morning air was crisp and filled with the soft sounds of the city waking up. Lila stepped out of her apartment, pulling her coat tightly around her as she made her way toward the bookstore. Her mind, however, was not on work alone. Thoughts of Ethan had begun to occupy a constant, quiet corner of her mind. There was a sense of anticipation in her steps, a gentle excitement that made her mornings feel lighter. At the bookstore, the familiar smell of paper and ink greeted her. Shelves lined with stories and knowledge stretched as far as the eye could see. She moved with purpose, arranging books, greeting customers, and helping people find what they needed. Yet throughout the day, her thoughts returned to the recent evenings she had spent with Ethan. Each encounter had been a blend of comfort, laughter, and small insights into one another's lives. These moments had begun to form a rhythm in her life, a gentle thread of hope weaving through the ordinary struggles she faced. Meanwhile, Ethan began his morning in his office, reviewing plans and reports, but his mind too was elsewhere. Lila's presence had left an impression that lingered even amidst the pressures of his professional life. He recalled her soft voice, the genuine warmth of her smile, and the quiet confidence she displayed despite the difficulties she faced. Unlike other interactions in his life, this one was unhurried, authentic, and refreshing. That evening, as Lila finished her second job, she decided to visit the restaurant, a place that had become a familiar and comforting setting for her and Ethan. The streets were damp from a recent rain, and the city lights reflected softly on the wet pavement. She walked with measured steps, anticipation fluttering in her chest. Upon entering the restaurant, she saw Ethan seated in their usual corner, a calm and welcoming presence amidst the ambient chatter of the diners. She approached and slid into the chair across from him. He looked up and offered a warm smile that seemed to ease away the fatigue she had carried from the long day. Conversation began lightly as usual, touching on minor details of their week, work, and the small events that had occurred. But soon their talk deepened, exploring topics that mattered more profoundly: dreams, regrets, and the personal challenges each had faced.